Welcome back to another Roundtable with State Reps. I'm State Rep Dan Caulkins. With us today is Representative Chris Miller, Representative Brad Halbrook, and Representative Adam Niemerg. It's good to be with you all. Last week we passed Senate Bill 2803, a bill appropriating $4.1 billion to shore up the Unemployment Insurance Trust, and also three other funds that we will discuss today. First, the bill included about $2.7 billion for the Unemployment Trust Fund. Adam, we owe substantially more than that.
Yes, Dan and folks, thanks for tuning in with us here today. We owe the feds about $4.5 billion with a B, folks. And if you look at a surplus that we're supposed to carry on that, you're looking at a $5.5 billion number. But what the Democrats decided to do, folks, and this is just unbelievable, they threw $2.7 billion at the problem, which leaves $1.8 billion of ARPA money that should be spent to plug this hole, and they just failed to do it.
Well, actually, we owed a little more than that, because when we started this pandemic, we had $1 billion in our unemployment trust fund that hasn't been replenished either. Mm-hmm. So in actuality, we have a $2.8 billion deficit.
That's absolutely correct, Dan. And where do you think that money's going to come from? If it's not going to come from ARPA dollars, it's going to come from the people of the state of Illinois. This will be a tax on every job throughout the state of Illinois. Small business will have to pay it back, and folks that are looking for unemployment benefits will have to have lesser benefits. So it's really a really bad deal that the governor and the Democrats decided not to allocate these funds where they need to allocate them to.
And we're incurring some interest charges on this money that we borrowed from the Feds.
Currently, it's $41 million as interest charges is what we now owe because of not getting this paid on time.
Mm-hmm. And Chris, I mean, it's costing us every month.
Well, you know, I think that it's important that we understand where this money actually came from. We had an unexpected revenue stream of $4.5 billion in this fiscal year, but there was some drivers that drove that, and it was one thing. It was the inflation because of the increased costs of goods and services, and you know, another thing that increased it was the income tax from the unemployment fund. So that increased. Now think about that for a minute. Okay, you're going to get unemployment from the government, and then they're going to turn around and tax the unemployment. Now, only in Illinois would we do something that's that dangerously stupid. But then another thing that Governor Pritzker rolled back the business incentives that were included in the 2019 budget, if you remember that. I know Dan would remember that, because I know that at the time, we're sitting there thinking, okay, this is a promise from the Democrats. Now, we've seen this movie before, and they've proven over time that, and I'm not sure why that they got 20 Republicans to put their votes on that bill, but it was really a bad idea.
It really was a bad idea. We were promised these tax cuts for businesses if we supported the 2019 budget, and then it wasn't a year later. Yeah. And finally, last year, they cut those taxes out and raised taxes on businesses, and which led to the deficit. So now, we also part of this bill was about $300 million from the General Revenue Fund to the Pension Stabilization Fund. Now, this is a bailout for the 5 state pension systems. And Adam, where did that $300 million, how did that work out?
Well, Dan, it's laughable. It really is if it wasn't so tragic, because you have $300 million in a sea of $300 billion in unfunded pension liabilities, and we need meaningful pension reform. Yet they're just politicking for press releases at this point. It's absolutely ridiculous.
And this is what we see from this administration. They're running around spending our money and putting out these press releases, and really no structural reforms. Right. Right. Also, at the same time, we put about $900 million from the General Revenue Fund to pay off the backlog of unpaid medical bills to our providers. So, Brad, what did we really do?
Yeah, so for the last several months, the Pritzker administration has been running around taking victory laps for balancing the books, getting the bill backlog in order, said, hey, we've got this down to a normal bill pay cycle. However, this backlog of these unpaid medical bills for the employees of the state of Illinois had amounted to almost $1 billion. Thankfully, due to this increase in revenue that was unexpected that Chris talked about earlier, they were able to get that hopefully caught up once again.
It's pretty interesting that, you know, the governor would run around to Illinois talking about how we're all caught up on our bills, and the treasurer's telling us and the comptroller's telling us that we're on a path and solvency and we're cutting it. And then they turn around and come back and ask for almost $1 billion to pay a backlog of just the medical bills. That's really, it's disingenuous.
Right.
Well, the last item in this appropriation was about $230 million, again from the General Revenue Fund, for the Illinois Prepaid Tuition Trust Fund, or as it's known as College Illinois. The FY22 budget, which is where we are today, already contained about $20 million appropriation for College Illinois. So why did we need the extra $250 million, Brad?
Well, this is a program that's been in existence for several years. It's been in trouble a couple of times before. Again, this is just another glaring example of another well-intentioned government program that went upside down. You know, there's just all kinds of problems when we put the state in charge of things like this that they shouldn't be in charge of. They put every taxpayer in the state of Illinois on the hook for this program, and it did go upside down. And here again, we're asking the taxpayers of the state of Illinois to put $250 million into this failed program. This program's not been beneficial to the low-income families that it really needed to help because of the unaffordability of the upfront cost.
That's pretty amazing. So I think we've bailed this program out 3 times
This is
now.
the 3rd time, I believe.
Yeah, and it's really not. Again, we started something that we had no idea how to fund. The money that we have invested doesn't cover the inflation. Tuition has gone up dramatically at our state universities, and now all of the taxpayers of Illinois are on the hook to pay off this tuition bill for the folks that did enroll. Well, what can we do, Chris? I mean, what can we do to make sure that this doesn't happen again? What reforms were put in place to keep this from being a recurring event?
Well, Dan, I think that's an excellent question. What reforms have been put in place? And let me think about that for a minute. None.
None. Well said. I think that's pretty well sums it up. And I think it sums up really what we're seeing in all of these funds. We're not seeing any pension reforms. We're not seeing any spending reforms. And all we're doing is throwing money out, trying to patch this over for another year. So that's kind of where things are going. Anything closing thoughts?
Yeah, Dan, thank you. Folks, this is about power and control. We have $8.9 billion that came in from ARPA. $6.9 billion has not been spent, but mostly has been allocated to Democrat pet projects. They put $2.7 billion in the Unemployment Trust Fund, leave you on the hook for the $1.8 billion. And then we have $4.5 billion coming in from revenues due to inflation. And what do? They have pet projects, and they kick the can down the road. It's politics for press releases. We're in a midterm election year, and that's all they care about, folks.
Very true. Chris, anything?
Yeah, I think that it's important for the people to be reminded that they need to be engaged in the process, that this is no time for apathy and indifference. We need accountability in Springfield. We need transparency in Springfield, because I know one of the most disappointing things to me about this session is Illinois broke and people are leaving, and we've done absolutely nothing in regard to structural reforms that will actually fix this state. So I encourage the voters to call the representatives and let them know how you feel, and let them know how important it is that we actually deal with the real problems that afflict Illinois.
So true. Brad, we're looking at a new budget now for next year. I mean, we're currently finishing FY22 at the end of June, and we're going to have to pass a new budget. You see any changes? You hear about anybody?
I think we're seeing this again play out just like it has in the past. We've had hearings and appropriations committees all spring long, but that kind of stopped about 2 weeks ago. Typically we go from hearings into working groups, and then bills come to the floor and we debate that. If working groups are going on, Republicans have not been invited to be a part of that, And so who only knows what's coming when it comes to this budget stuff with just a few days left in this spring session to get it done, to see how we're going to move forward. But again, gentlemen, we've talked about this just earlier, that we continue to do these new spending programs, new borrowing, and maybe new taxing on somebody to prop up these failed programs, and no reforms, nothing to make it better for the people that pay the freight for us to be here and for this state to operate.
So true. Well, thank you again for being with us this week for another roundtable discussion. We'll be back again soon. We hope you enjoyed this, and stay engaged. We have a big budget, I think, crisis coming. We have a budget discussion coming, and we'll see you all again next week.